Hey everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is a Right Angle Lightning Round brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Instead of one big story, I've got headlines, smaller, sometimes stranger stories, hand-selected for Bill and Scott. They have no idea what these stories are, which is fun for me, not so much for them. Scott's shaking his head again already. I love it to death. And you know what, Scott, just for that, I was going to start with Bill this week. I'm going to start with you instead. So first headline, Biden blames Trump for 60,000 coronavirus deaths for not shutting down country earlier. But Biden held rallies through March 10th. So I guess the question here I wanted to ask you, Scott, is Joe who?
Well, he's out in public now, actually. I saw, I was watching CNN this morning, and there's a lot of admiration of the former senator, former vice president of the United States, because he appeared in a church and spoke at times through a mask and at times not, which mystified me. I thought, well, either use the mask or
you
don't.
Gotta commit.
That's right. You see a lot of people like this out in public, by the way, who are wearing the thing as a chin strap. And I'm just like, I don't think that's helping anything. You might as well just throw it away. But anyway, so he has gotten out in public and you hear a lot of talk about how this is the kind of compassionate, sensitive, listening kind of leadership that we need to have. But when you're going to be compassionate and sensitive and intelligent and following the science and all that, and then try to blame the president of the United States for 60,000 deaths, which, of course, there's no scientific basis for establishing that. But in any case, the president and the CDC and the White House, press briefings, they were making recommendations. All of those things were enforced at the local level. So there's no reason why your county or your Democrat-run city or your state could not have done things sooner. And in fact, many businesses did act on their own timetable based on the information they had. So I don't think that, I think it really fulfills a view of the presidency that perhaps Democrats like, which is the idea that you could turn the economy on and off anytime you want to, and that the president should have power to shut down the country. But in effect, Trump has been giving the governors a relatively free hand and basically telling them, here's what we know right now, use your best judgment. And then, kind of slapping them around when they're doing things he doesn't agree with. But he has not invoked his powers in some way to make things happen at the local level. And I think that bothers Biden.
Oh, we really dodged a bullet when that guy decided not to run in 2016. I worry maybe Trump couldn't have beaten him because everybody hated Hillary. Ugh, I don't like to think about that. All right, Bill, this one's for you. Oh, this is our shocking headline of the day. Minnesota and New York officials say evidence shows weekend riots were planned. Chicago demands Fed investigation into organized violence. And, of course, the group that dare not speak its name, Antifa.
It's kind of amusing to listen to people like AOC say that the windows are being smashed by Trump supporters and white nationalists, white supremacists. There's lots of young black males in the white supremacist movement that you can recruit to go ahead and do these things. Of course it is. And Scott and I had a conversation about this on a Bill Now episode, and we had a much more in-depth conversation about it without the cameras running. And the tragedy is that because Antifa is a terrorist organization that basically lives off of streets burning and rioting and looting and so on, and these things demand a police response. They need a police response in order for them to have video of the police, arresting people that they can use and so on. But the tragedy is that all of this pulls this pre-programmed fill in the blank riot package that's been set up and produced. The tragedy is it pulls so much away from George Floyd and what happened to him and the genuine sympathy and outrage that everyone should feel about this. Regardless of your position about the police or Black Lives Matter, this is just watching it. It's just appalling. And what is basically happening is that people like Antifa, and Antifa specifically, obviously, are stealing. It's almost a bit like stolen valor.
Yeah.
It's like stolen. It's like stolen tragedy. I almost said victimhood, but victimhood has got a kind of a bad name, and I don't get the feeling that George Floyd was a victim, a professional victim. It's like it's stolen tragedy, and to take this appalling incident, which should have the sympathy of every single person in America who's ever seen it, including the police officers who do, in fact, understand how appalling it was. They have hijacked this and turned it now into a law and order issue, which is what the president's responding to it as. And now that it becomes a law and order issue, the people who are in favor of law and order are portrayed as being somehow in favor of what happened to George Floyd. And that's certainly not the case. But yeah, it's a low strategy by people who proudly proclaim themselves to be anarchists and communists, and this is what they do. What did you expect?
Indeed. Scott, next one is for you. Actually, I forgot I picked this headline for you because we talked a little bit about this behind the scenes today. Trump holds Bible in front of church. Liberals everywhere are triggered. Can he do that?
Well, I will acknowledge that the whole episode of the president walking down to the church that had been vandalized and set on fire by rioters among an otherwise peaceful protest, it was tremendously awkward. I'm not sure why it was being done or what the president's people thought it would convey. And to have TV cameras rolling while you're in effect appear to be posing for a still picture, all of that, just everything about it was weird. And when I first saw it, and I mentioned to you guys, I said I felt like not only did the president hold the Bible as if he had never held one before, but he held the Bible as if he had never held a book before. I mean, it seems so weird. It was like a cereal box in his hand, like he didn't quite know what to do with it. And I'm sure it's, for some campaign postcard or something. I don't know what they're going to do with that. I think the optics of it were awful. I think it represents a kind of tone deafness, and the fact that so many evangelical Christians who have a public profile with the mainstream media have immediately started talking about what a great moment it was. It would have been a great moment if the president had actually gone to church and prayed and worshiped and sought reconciliation and read the Bible and stuff like that. The Bible's not a prop. And for whatever his motivations were, which I don't understand, that's not going to play well, and it shouldn't play well with Christians either, no matter what you think of President Trump.
Trump is usually the master of a photo op, but you're right, that one was awkward. It would be the word I would use. On the other hand, when you have the left up in arms after their progressive thugs set fire to the church, then getting angry at Trump for going and visiting it with a Bible, whether it was awkward or graceful. I don't think that's the point here. The point is that the usual people are just angry about the usual stuff, and it's just silly sometimes. All right, Bill. Oh, I really like this. Brian Dean White had this thing on Twitter on Monday that I put up on Instapundit Monday night. He said he just had a conversation with a progressive Democrat in Colorado. That's here where I live. And this guy that he talked to is a major fundraiser. And the fundraiser guy told Brian Dean White, the protesters got a few blocks from my house, and I don't know anybody who owns a gun. Says he's buying a gun today, and that the left is losing their base. People choose order over anarchy. Are we seeing 1968 all over again here, do you think?
Took the words right out of my mouth. Must have been while you were kissing me. Couldn't do it, man. There's Meatloaf hanging right there. You got to go with it.
Right, you had to.
You got to go with it. I get the feeling that the people who are promoting this, the looting and the rioting, look, people are constantly making this distinction between the looting and the protesting.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. The thing that I find annoying is when you hear the press basically saying, as if to the looters, "Don't do this. You're dishonoring the memory of what this whole thing's about in the first place." And I want to say, it's not that the looters don't know. It's that they don't care. It's not, they're not the same people. The looters and the protesters are not the same people. It's just one is the cover for the, go and smash a store and come out with armloads of designer justice. It's not the same thing. So when you get down to it, what you find is that once again, this idea that a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged by reality, this happened in just innumerable cases during the Rodney King riots out here. And what it goes to show is that this idea of society that liberals have is something that even they realize does not survive contact with unpleasantness. And you can't create a world that doesn't connect to unpleasantness, though they think they can. This is almost like a seasonal thing, Steve. It's almost like a comet or something, that it comes back every 20 or 30 years or so and reminds them. It's like, oh, yeah, I might have to get a gun because, because I don't want to be dragged out of my house and have happen to me what happened to Reginald Denny, for example, back in the Rodney King riots. My wife and I were casually, calmly cleaning our weapons last night out on the pouch. Portio is the patio as the sun went down. We put up a little screen because we didn't want to alarm the native Californians. I'm serious.
No, I'm laughing because I know it's true.
But she spoke it, and I have been feeling it since I first purchased a weapon back after I wrote an essay on guns and eject, and somebody gave me one. The left doesn't understand this. They think that the weapon ownership fills you with this kind of yeehaw kind of, but there is a certain tranquility. Really, there's a certain tranquility that comes from a 45 caliber 1911 automatic and a number of rounds of pistols and additional firepower if necessary. There is a tremendous sense of tranquility that says that I suspect that if somebody decides to come through this window or through this door, once the first two or three of them drop, I suspect the rest of them are going to move on to greener pastures. I really think they're going to start looking at other streets to riot on and loot. And what we're seeing now in 2020, again with the looters, not with the protesters, with the looters, we are seeing that when people show up with firearms, they generally tend to move to the next place. And during the Rodney King riots, the only buildings that were standing at the end of these burned out neighborhoods were the Korean buildings, because the Koreans were on the roof with rifles and guns and basically just saying, we got nothing to lose. We're from Korea. So that seems to be the case. Giuliani said, just because I just want to get this in there,
yeah.
I listened to Giuliani on Fox last night, and he said, listen, this idea that by letting them have some steam, letting them blow off steam, this is going to release the thing, he said, is absolutely nuts. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. He said he dealt with a number of riots during his time in New York. And he said, when people were protesting, that's one thing. When one person threw a rock at a police car, we arrested that person immediately. And the next person to throw a rock, we arrested them immediately and made it crystal clear that this is not something you get away with. And they just disappeared. We saw that in Miami just as I was leaving in the late 80s in Overtown riots and so on. They had two or three really bad ones, Liberty City and so on. And then they finally just got on the perpetrators right off. And the next one just never developed.
Giuliani's New York City was a pretty great place. I remember, this is something that really annoys me about our leftist friends. You might complain about Times Square. It's so well lit and it's run by big companies and chains and all the rest. You're not going to see anything you don't see anywhere else except, the lights are brighter and the signs are bigger and all the rest. But I remember Anthony Bourdain on one of his shows, maybe for CNN or Travel Channel or something, complaining that the old Times Square, the pre-Giuliani Times Square, was authentic. That if you've got junkies passed out on the sidewalk with needles sticking out of their arms, and the worst sort of abused streetwalkers selling their bodies in alleys and all the rest, and shuttered shop windows, and the only businesses are the seediest kind of strip clubs, that this is somehow authentic and more desirable than having a place where you can have a little fun, see the lights, and do some shopping. I don't buy that. But we are seeing the results of this attitude right now on the streets of so many of our cities, that this is somehow an authentic expression of rage. Well, I understand the rage. I really do. I watched that video last week, and oh, dear God, I've never seen anything more horrible than that. And I've seen some horrible videos on the internet. I understand the rage, but the idea that tearing down something beautiful and replacing with something ugly because it is more authentic makes me a little sad and a lot confused. Maybe one of these days I'll figure it out, and maybe one of these days the rest of us will too. And that is your right angle lightning round. I'm sorry I went on a rant and forgot all about my own headline. I'm going to save it for next time. We'll see you in about 3 weeks. Thanks for watching. If you like stuff like this, please click over to BillWhittle.com and become a member. We would love to have you on board, and we need your support. So what are you waiting for? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.